Welcome back to the channel. We have not talked about the Power of the Force 2 line in a long time, and I know a lot of you guys collect those, so I did put together some recent sales for the Power of the Force 2 line that ran from 1995 until about 2000. I also did include one Episode 1 figure that sold here recently that I wanted to talk about. As always, thanks to my Patreon supporters, and if you're new to the channel, I try to provide price guides for different Star Wars action figure lines. You can leave me a like if you enjoyed this video and consider subscribing. Alrighty, so let's take a closer look at some sales, and they're kind of all over the map. We're starting off with some vehicles and box sets that are relatively inexpensive, but good additions to anyone's collection. First is the Power of the Force 2 version of Darth Vader's TIE Fighter. $65 free shipping. So a lot of these vehicles from the Power of the Force 2 line, they are just not very expensive, and you can pick up some really nice factory sealed examples for relatively cheap. The Falcon is another good one to consider. Instead of paying $700 for the Smuggler's Run Vintage Collection version, you can spend $120 and get this one from the Power of the Force 2 line. And this one was factory sealed. $120 plus $32 shipping is what that sold for. The Rancor is another very popular one, just given that we don't really have a good Rancor other than the Vintage Kenner one, which has very basic finishes and paint applications. And then this one. And I think there is another example. I can't remember which line it was. I know that there's a Black Series version that's pretty pricey, but if you're looking for a fairly inexpensive example that's still factory sealed, includes the Luke with his big chicken bone. This one was $160 free shipping, so that's about the going rate. I found several different data points between $140 and $175 for the Rancor with Luke Skywalker. On to some mint on cards. This is actually a pretty rare one if it's legit. I think it is. And this is the Power of the Force 2 Yoda on the red card, but it has the hologram sticker. Most of these did not have the holograms. There are some common ones, and don't quote me on this, but I think it's R2-D2, the Stormtrooper, Princess Leia, and then I think Ben Kenobi are the four that are very common to have the red card with the hologram sticker. But usually it's just a regular kind of sticker with normal colors. But if you can find these red cards with the holograms, there are some out there, but they're very tough to find. This one was not perfect. It did have a crease in the upper right-hand corner, as you can see there, but that still sold for $75. If you can find a Boba Fett, that's the magic one. But a lot of people will try to trick you on eBay by peeling off the hologram sticker off of a green card and then put it on the red card, and you'll see ripples in the hologram sticker. This one, I don't see anything that indicates that it's fake. It looks legit to me. No peeling at all. And this, corner being kind of wrapped around the blister is common. That's a very common thing. But anyway, that's one to keep an eye out for. If you might happen to see one that hits eBay for $6 and it's actually a fairly expensive item. So red cards with the holograms, except for those particular characters that I mentioned. Again, don't quote me on that. But Yoda is not one of that list that's easy to find. And that's why it sold for $75 very quickly. Weekley on the freeze frame action slide on the US card is the expensive one. This one is the Canadian trilingual example. You can see there it's got the trilingual. It also did have a ding on the blister. But even on the Canadian card bag, it's still very desirable. The Weekley with the freeze frame action slide only. There are other Weekley card backs, but the one with the freeze frame action slide is the one that you want. And if you see it cheap, probably worth picking up. This one was listed for $100, best offer accepted. Again, it wasn't perfect. It did have a big ding on the blister. This one was in much better condition, pretty much mint. And that one sold for $120. And again, that was the Canadian example. I've seen the US version for the freeze frame action slide Weekley go for double that price or more. If it's in high grade, it can sell, like AFA graded, it can sell for $300. So it's, for whatever reason, it was just short packed, not many of them out there. And so on the US card is the expensive one, although the trilingual version has gotten pretty expensive, as you can see there. Any of the Showtime exclusive orange stickers on the card backs are very expensive. They are on the green cards with, I think, only foil. And this one, again, had the Showtime sticker. Now, what concerns me on this one is that it had this peel down here in the lower right-hand corner. So someone could have peeled it off of a different card back and put it on this Dengar. So you're taking a little bit of risk that it's legit. But these were apparently only given out to Showtime employees when the original Star Wars film was being released on Showtime, the special edition version. But there are a number of different characters that have that Showtime sticker. This one did sell in an auction for $100. Again, I'm assuming it's legit, but it did have some peel in the lower right-hand corner of that sticker. The Retooled Shadows version of Darth Vader is a very pricey one, and I got two different examples that sold. This one was ungraded, but in pretty mint condition. And what do I mean by Retooled Shadows? There was a 2-pack with Prince Zizor, where it included a Darth Vader that was retooled. It had an all-new sculpt to it. And you can spot it because the cape swirl goes underneath the lightsaber on the single carded examples. So they took that 2-pack version of Vader that came with Prince Zizor and a comic book, and then they also started releasing it on single card backs, and I think it was only exclusive to JCPenney. Again, don't quote me on that, but that's the way to spot it, is to have that cape swirl that comes underneath the lightsaber like that. So this ungraded example of the Retooled Shadows Darth Vader sold for $140. And then here was a really good deal that CIB had recently in an auction. This was an AFA 80 of the Retooled Shadows, as it's labeled here, uncirculated 80 grade, and it sold for $100. So this one actually was graded in uncirculated designation and sold for less than what this one sold for that was ungraded. So it's just crazy how that can work sometimes. But for the Power of the Force 2 line, it all comes down to who's looking. And that was a good deal for the Retooled Shadows and an uncirculated AFA 80. On to some autographs. These were Toy Expo exclusives. This one was for the International Collectible Toy Expo. This is number 163, as you can see on the sticker. And most of those kind of weird toy expos from Japan or Philly Toy Expo or wherever usually include the actor. What a goofy looking picture of Peter Mayhew. And this one obviously was signed by Peter Mayhew. This one sold for $125. This one was a half circles variant for Boba Fett with Jeremy Bulloch's signature that sold for $160. The circles on the hands usually came full circles, black circles, but some of them had no circle at all, and some of them had half circles, like this one, as you can see right there. So that's a pretty desirable Power of the Force 2 Boba Fett variant. Plus, it's also signed by Jeremy Bulloch for $160. Good deal there. Here was a Mark Hamill signed Luke Skywalker on the red card. That one was listed for $300. Best offer accepted. And I didn't look up what it sold for, probably $250-ish. But Mark Hamill is very expensive to get signed. And I know he charges more than that now just to get a signature if you're into having Looney Tunes Mark Hamill sign a card back. But that one was listed for $300, and $250 is what I'm guessing it sold for. I didn't look it up. Here were some examples from One Stop Comic Shop. Daniel over at One Stop Comic Shop. He is a friend of the channel. He had some that were CAS Signature Series graded. So this was a freeze frame action slide 9-num signed by Mike Quinn, who obviously was the actor that portrayed 9-num. And this one was a Signature Series yellow label. Very good thing to do with your Power of the Force 2 autograph. You send it into CAS for the Signature Series. They charge you $35 or so for the James Spence authentication, and then you also have to pay on top of that the actual grading of the item. So this one was $85, $90, $85 for an overall $85. And Mike Quinn is kind of known for this goofy signature where he does a 9-num with capital N, 9-num. And that one did sell. It was listed for $225. Best offer accepted. You figure you got $75 in grading fees plus shipping to and from the grading company. That's a pretty decent deal at $225. Best offer accepted. Same seller also had Weekley signed by Julius Lafleur, who played Weekley. That one was graded CAS 85 plus. 85, 90, 90 were the subscores on that one. Very cool item there. And again, the sales price was $225. Some other graded examples. This was a red card full circle. So this is probably the most common of all the Boba Fetts because it's got full circles on the hands, as you can see right there, versus that half circle signed example we saw from Jeremy Bullock. So this is the most common. AFA 85, that one sold for $150. The freeze frame action slide is one of the more desirable variants. That one also comes with either full circles or half circles. This one had the full circles, AFA 85, that sold for $170. $170 for that one. But if you can find the freeze frame action slide with the half circles, that would be a very desirable variant to have. Some other examples, CIB had this AFA uncirculated 90 long lightsaber. So this has got the long saber uncirculated 90. And again, a very common one, the very first example of the Power of the Force 2 Luke that came out. He-Man, Prince Adam, if you will, because of his muscles, 207.50 on that one. And the more desirable and very rare one is the transition tray Luke Skywalker Farm Boy. This one is one that Power Droid had, AFA 9.0, and the transition tray just means that they went from that long saber that you see here. They decided it was too big, so they transitioned over to a shorter saber, but they still had a lot of the parts for the inner tray left over. So a lot of those smaller sabers made it into the inner tray, and you can see there that inner tray has a longer tube for the original saber. So for whatever reason, the transition tray Luke Skywalker is the rarest. They also did come for Luke Dagobah, Luke X-Wing, which are not nearly as expensive, and Darth Vader is another one. And then very rare to find is the Obi-Wan Kenobi. They do exist. I've seen examples of them for the Obi-Wan Kenobi. That's easily the rarest Power of the Force 2 item that I know of, excluding like pre-production stuff or, first shot prototypes or things like that, but missed cards or errors. But Obi-Wan with the transition tray is very rare. If you got one, get it graded because it's a extremely rare item and probably the most expensive Power of the Force 2 retail release item there is. But they do exist. I have seen them in the Facebook groups. So this one was an AFA 9.0 transition tray Luke, and it did sell for $500. That's towards the upper end of the range. It was a buy it now, but I would think in an auction you could probably pick it up for $300 or so. That's my guess, somewhere in that ballpark. Next up was a short saber long tray Luke Farm Boy, but this one was on the Tri-Logo card back. This is one I did have AFA graded in my collection, but you can see very clearly there the saber is shorter than the inner tray, and that one sold for $100 ungraded. It did have some damage in the lower left-hand corner, unfortunately, so that kept the price down. But, an AFA graded example probably set you back $200 to $250 would be my guess on that. And then finally, this is the Episode 1 figure, and I don't know what to make of it, all right? So this one was Darth Maul, AFA 90, but if you look on the AFA label, it says AFA sample. And the only thing I can think of is based on that certification number of *000 7. This one was graded by AFA as an example. So this would be like an early prototype AFA case. That's the only thing I can think of. I don't know what AFA sample means. That's all I can think of. It's all lowercase too. So to me, this is some kind of weird prototype case that when AFA was kind of testing out Episode 1 figures, making sure that the fit was right. I don't know. But it did sell last weekend in an auction for $237.50. I would love to know what it is. Let's see if it says anything here. Hasbro AFA sample mock. So, that's all it says in the description is AFA sample mock. And again, I think what it is that the engineers over at AFA, when they were designing the cases for either Episode 1 and or Power of the Force 2 figures, they were just trying to make sure that the dimensions were correct for future submissions. And so it got a 90 grade. It's labeled AFA sample. It's just kind of a cool piece of collecting history, I guess, if you're into that kind of thing. But it only sold for $237.50. Probably a really good deal on something that I have no idea what it means, but I'm just speculating as to what it is. So anyway, that's all I really had. I just hadn't covered the Power of the Force 2 line in a while. Again, please leave me a like if you enjoyed this video. Thank you as always for watching, and I'll be back soon.